Hey guys, it's Malthor here once again, and I've got quite a lot of clips to show you of the Slayer Arborix Shrapnel Shot character that I've been playing for the past few days, because at this point the character is something like level 91 and it has taken on everything I've thrown at it in the game so far. That is all the maps and bosses from like tier 13 to 16. We're talking red tier, high tier, Elder Guardians, the tier 15 new bosses with funky map mods, as you can see one or two right here. The tier 16 Guardians, Shaper, Uber Itziri, done everything with it, and basically Slayer bow character with an Arborix and a Chin Soul in the offhand, or pretty much a lot of different bows. You can use Death's Opus, Lion Eyes, just a pure fizz bow, lots of stuff. Actually works really well. So the main concept here is basically just bow slayer with some elemental conversion happening. Beyond that, it's kind of all up to you. You don't even have to use Shrapnel Shot as I'm using in this video, so keep that in mind. You can easily replace it with a Tornado Shot, with a Ice Shot, Lightning Arrow, some Barrage, single target, all that sort of stuff. If you use a different clear skill, you will of course need a Barrage setup for single target, because otherwise you're just not really going to be doing any damage with your clear skills. Or you can of course keep Shrapnel Shot as a single target and use a different clear skill. Whereas if you use something like Tornado Shot with the Helm enchant especially, that can be your area and your single target, just like Shrapnel Shot is. Besides that, I wouldn't really recommend using any one bow skill for both things. For me though, Shrapnel Shot has been performing incredibly well. It one-shots just about anything you actually get a crit with it against. So most of the rares that you get from Abysses and from Trash and all that just get straight one-shotted, and there's no real danger of dying to Reflect anymore because, well, it doesn't exist. So you can stack as much single hit crit multi type stuff as much as you want, and just obliterate monsters these days. And Shrapnel Shot has felt like a really nice clear with a really nice single target at the same time, and it's something a bit different from Barrage. So I've been playing it, I've been loving it. I do recommend you at least try it, but it's not for everyone. Plenty of people say this looks shit and I do not enjoy this skill. That's entirely fine. Just make sure you try it out, all up to your own, and see how you like it. The main take home and key message I'm currently peddling here is Slayer is pretty amazing for this league. That's not really a surprise to anyone. That's not really game breaking information, but Slayer as a bow character seems to have enough damage, enough sort of bow utility to be really quite durable for this league. So you do get a shitload of extra leech percentage and leech rate and all of that as a Slayer. So that means that whenever you take some damage, it gets recovered almost instantly and makes for probably the tankiest bow character I've ever played. And there's no greater example of my Slayer overleech than this boss here, which has plenty of, sort of physical tornadoes spinning all over the place, and you're not supposed to stand in them because they do degen you quite hard. And a traditional bow character that I've played in the past with Valpact definitely experiences shit like that. Slayer don't give a shit. Slayer just runs straight through all that, AFKs in it if you really want to. It really does lend itself to a much more looser playstyle, I'd say, though I wouldn't want to get too used to that. I definitely think you should still practice dodging shit and all that, but you can see even with my absolutely atrocious frames here, you can pretty much just run through that stuff without caring a little bit. Now, I do have all of the Guardian clips to show you guys, but the frames for these are absolutely awful because my, computer has been super struggling trying to play these new Guardians. So every time one of them loads, my game damn near freezes and locks up. Whenever they do their big attacks, it damn near freezes and locks up. And you can see some of that in these clips, but it's nowhere near as bad as it is on my end. So dodging this shit is really tough, and actually playing around them is really tough. For the most part, I get hit by plenty of stuff and just have to face tank plenty of shit. So something like Shrapnel Shot Slayer definitely comes in handy for these sorts of situations where I would otherwise just be getting obliterated because I can't dodge things fast enough with absolutely zero frame rate. Sometimes it's okay and it's a little bit smooth, but quite a lot of the time it is just chopping and chunking, and it has not been a pleasant experience. Now at this point, there are a few other little frame fixes I can try, and maybe even reinstalling the game, which is something I'll try as well, but I will also be actually putting together a new computer sometime soon, and hopefully that will fix it too. I don't want you to think that's the only solution though. I'm sure there are plenty of things we can try to actually get it sort of up and rolling. It's not the biggest deal, it just does chop my frames a fair bit, and especially when I'm streaming. If you're not streaming, well, hopefully it's nowhere near as big of an issue for you. You can see though, all of these hits that are coming in are pretty goddamn fierce, and we recover fairly fast until I inevitably get one shot by an attack I didn't really know how to dodge, defend against, whatever. This guy is kind of just a mess in the tier 12 to 14 category, because he hits really hard and it's kind of hard to dodge shit, especially when you're framing out like I do. But overall, these are all tier 12 to 14 Elder Guardians, and they, don't really die too hard. The Cull comes in real handy, especially for the last phases when they're supposed to get most hectic, and the Slayer Leech, you can see, just basically farms. You can run through all kinds of shit, you can tank all kinds of shit, and then recover damn near immediately. So it is very handy and very useful for the current meta out there. Now you can see that quite a lot of the time or you should be able to see, that I'm running a Chinsol for my actual single target. If in my Q button you don't see a ranged attack totem, that means I've swapped into Chinsol for single target, because it does something like 70 to 80% more damage than my current bow, up close and in single target situations. So there's no reason to not swap into our 1 alchemy cost Chinsol when fighting the toughest of enemies, because it really just doesn't compete. No other bow really competes unless you have a completely insane mirror quality, mirror tier sort of bow. Over here I kind of just fluffed and didn't dodge what I was supposed to dodge, so I did unfortunately die. And this is a tier 14 Elder, so he is a bit tankier than the usual, but he does still die pretty quickly, and so do all the portals and everything. It's fairly smooth, all things considered otherwise. Chinsol is what I'm using, like I mentioned, and it does carry some serious DPS behind it. Like I said, only costs 1 alch. You do of course have to be up really close to get the full benefit of it, and I'm still very much using my Arborix for everything except for the toughest of tough targets, because the 2 additional arrows and the movement speed and attack speed does really still help quite a lot for your clear and make the character feel a bit nicer. But as I've mentioned, by no means is this really an Arborix character. It's mostly just a bow character. You don't necessarily have to use the Arborix. If it's really too expensive because of some certain streamers inflating the price, thanks to their arsehole viewers, then by all means you don't have to use an Arborix. It's just a kind of nice quality of life weapon for certain situations and some certain fun. You'd probably have to just sub in a different bow with a slightly different setup, and I'll go over that in a few minutes as well. This is my first attempt at Shaper this entire league, because I've finally managed to build my way up to tier 16 maps and Shaper himself, and it went pretty damn smooth and uneventfully. I don't have all of the tier 16 Guardian clips for you because, well, the video would just be way too messy by that point. Here is also Uber that I did for the first time and took on quite fairly uneventfully, but yeah, it's just going to be too long of a video. Long story short, tier 16 Guardians did go down fairly smooth as well. I did die a couple of times to some of them, mostly the Minotaur, because face tanking him is not the greatest strategy, but the damage was fairly good against them all the same, and very doable as a character like this, even with my current life pool. It's not amazing, but yeah, we killed them pretty damn quickly, and you can look through the VOD to find it. I'd say the Phoenix was my fastest kill, and it took something like 10-15 seconds, so it was fairly impressive damage overall. For Uber though, I did die just a few little times to a couple mistakes here or there. It's still very much possible to die to this sort of stuff, but it is a good enough character to take this on fairly reliably. I should have only really died maybe once throughout this entire fight, but I did die a couple of times thanks to my own mistakes. Like for example here, when I don't get the crits I need and I wasn't ready to move when I really definitely should have been. So that's definitely my own fault. So yeah, we've taken on all the content, and I do want to show you guys exactly what I've done for now for a few changes. So I will give you more or less a full rundown, but a few of the key important shit to cover right now, just to start with, is, yeah, like I said, we are using an Arborix to start with, but it doesn't have to be. It can be like I said, a Death's Opus, also very competitive, a Lionized Glare, a real Fizzbow, whatever it is. You can even run Chinsol permanently. Basically, the draw of the bow is having a couple of extra arrows, and in this build, it's just a little bit smoother for clear, so you can have your volley and then 2 additional arrows. Whereas if you didn't have these 2 additional arrows, you're probably just running GMP, and then it still feels pretty damn good for clear, but not the same. I've been enjoying volley just a bit better with the 2 arrows. And then as well as that, I didn't take Iron Reflexes, so I do get 30 attack cast movement speed every now and again, so you do run pretty damn quick from pack to pack without that. Iron Reflexes up, but when the Iron Reflexes are up, you hit a bit harder. So overall, it's a nice little bow that gives you some decent balance here or there, but it's by no means that incredible that you have to wear it, because Chinsol over here in your offhand, which this one here cost me 1 alchemy, deals a shitload more damage, and I'll show you exactly what I mean in the path of building over here. This is currently our 700,000 cone from Shrapnel shot with my full setup, which isn't optimum by the way. So 700,000 right here, and that is with a Chinsol. Now when you do click your Chinsol into the setup, you do have to make sure that you actually tick is enemy at close range, because that's the 100% more modifier that comes from Chinsol. So it's not the same as the projectile travel distance of 1 that you get from point blank, which is still a 50% more. It's a different little thing to tick altogether. If you don't put 1 projectile distance, then that's what your damage with point blank will look like, so you have to make sure you tick that, and then close range, that's your Chinsol damage, because you compare the other damage, your Chinsol damage over here, 700k, so let's say our Arborix, which is only 350, and then in best case scenario, you'd increase that by 30% when you have Iron Reflexes, and obviously that's going to be a lot less than 700k. So that's our damage for Chinsol in our 6-link setup with a volley and with added fire, which isn't too optimal, because if you take out added fire, it's just one of the convenient ones I had in my chest over here, because it is a pure red chest. When you take out the added fire and manage to get a 4th off color, for example with Conk Effect, it is a shitload more damage, and if you can get around to doing that, it's definitely worth it. I personally haven't really even tried, because this has been good enough for me. So I've been using a suboptimal setup, though I did just check, and turns out MAME itself is actually a little better than added fire, especially if you can't triple cap your Wise Oak resists. So this is going to be basically was my 6-link at all times with the Mirage Archer, because I thought he helped a lot, and he also does not come into play in our tooltip. So overall, with Fizz Proj as well, instead of volley, our single target's actually pretty dirty. It's about 1 million damage right here just on the cone from Shrapnel shot, and then as well as that, Mirage Archer is attacking for pretty close to the same amount of damage but less attack speed, so he's got something like 40-50% extra damage for our setup, and also he comes into play a lot more when you're moving around. So when you get a few shots off and then you have to move, he's actually doing good damage for you that you otherwise would not be. So overall, I think he's a pretty much no-brainer to chuck into your setup. So that's probably the main intricacies I had to cover. Since last video, not really too much else has changed. I am using, for the most part, everything still as normal. Assassin's Mark on hit here. It's not terribly important. You could easily just get away with a self-curse every now and again on tougher things, because it doesn't really help all too much, I don't think. I am running a Hatred and a Herald of Ash. Otherwise, you could probably, just run a Blasphemy if you really want to. And I am running a Frost Bomb for extra damage, because we do deal quite a lot of cold damage, something like probably a little more than 1/3 of our damage is cold, meaning the Frost Bomb underneath a boss will help just a little bit as well. For the most part, since I do have 2 6-links or 2 5-links to go with for Arborix, since I'm just pure Shrapnel, I did make a ranged attack totem setup. It doesn't really seem like it helps too much, but it does do a bit of extra damage, and I couldn't really think of what else I'd chuck into my links for this sort of shit, so I just put it in there anyway. But that does not at all matter, because when I swap into Chinsol for single target, I don't get him anyway. So you can play around with your own little setup as to what you want to do there, but that's currently what I did. Otherwise, gear's nothing too special, but it is decent. Try and get weapon elemental damage or elemental damage with attacks just about everywhere you can, and balancing your Wise Oak, if you're dealing all 3 like I am currently, is somewhat important. So I do have my Wise Oak at 75 to each resist, though all you need is the same resist at any level. Doesn't have to be 75, can be 150 or whatever. So when you get your Wise Oak up, you do get triple 15% penetration and triple 10 reduced. It's very nice to do. So aside from that, the only other major change, as I mentioned in the last video, is that I would probably have gone for the leech nodes and this mana leech node, because the stability of having this permanent leech always is too good to give up, and I definitely do recommend doing this as well. Prior to this leech, I just had its Zeri Flask leech and some Blood Rage, as well as this little node over here. It just wasn't enough to fully take advantage of Slayer Leech, because I've barely got any fizz. The 0.4% over here is fairly insignificant, and having to rely on its Zeri Flask for a little bit of leech just isn't that comfortable. So I did drop a few things to be able to grab this, and the Overleech and the leech just makes it so much nicer with Vitality Void, so I do recommend grabbing that. I don't think I really changed too much else on the tree. I just don't really get Frenzy Charges, which is something I thought I could fit into the build initially, but certainly is not the case anymore. So that's my tree for Shrapnel Shot. You could use it for a few other skills as well. You may need to change a few things. If you're going pure Tornado Shot, for example, you probably want a bit more conversion happening, because otherwise you can deal a lot of fizz and miss out on a lot of fizz to early conversion scaling, but that is kind of up to you guys as to what you do there. The only other thing I feel I should mention is that don't be intimidated by this thing having a 6-link. The added fire really doesn't help that much overall. So I did get lucky and 6-link this in like 500 fusings or something, but you can see that currently our DPS, let's just go with Chinsol, sitting at about 30k on my Shrapnel. Taking out the added fire is only another 5,000, so it's only something like, 15-20% of the actual damage. It's really not that crucial. If you're using a much bigger 6-link link like Conk Effect, then of course it's going to be a lot better. But currently in my setup and all the clips you saw, I wasn't doing anything too crazy. It was just an added fire, and the damage wasn't too stupid. So you can definitely get away with some much more budget setup with a 5-link over here, for example, and just a Death's Opus, let's say, or plenty of other different bows that come to mind. Just make sure you have a Chinsol in your weapon swap and you are running Slayer, because I do recommend this as a sort of overall bow character for this league. The Cull's amazing, the Onslaught all the time, and the Overleech just feels really nice to have. If you've never tried a Slayer before, maybe this is the time. Overall though, Slayer's pretty overpowered this entire league. It's not just my character or bows in general, it's everything. So get onto one of those. But that's it though, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, the character. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.